Dark clouds mantle the fields of Britain as Viking prows cut silently through cold river currents. Torchlight flickers against what remains of once peaceful monasteries, turned now into charred husks by marauders who fear no lord, no creed. In the face of this chaos, one figure refuses to abandon hope for his people. Alfred, the uneasy king of Wessex, a man who never aspired to the throne yet stands now between survival and oblivion. If he fails, what little remains of Anglo-Saxon independence will vanish. If he succeeds, a new form of kingship will light the way, forging unity where only disarray has reigned. England, as an entity, scarcely exists at this time. Instead, the land is sliced into smaller realms, most of which have crumbled before the ferocity of the great heathen army. Northumbria lies subdued, East Anglia fallen, Mercia battered. In what remains of Wessex, King Ethelred passes from this world in 871, leaving Alfred as successor. But Alfred inherits a battered domain teetering on the edge of ruin, its armies scattered, local lords in disarray, its future overshadowed by the unstoppable tide of Viking raids. Within months, he suffers stinging defeats, retreats, and watches his circle of influence shrink to a handful of loyal Thans. Many believe that once Wessex is ground into submission, nothing will remain of Anglo-Saxon power. The horizon grows bleaker in each passing season, culminating in Alfred's desperate flight into the marshes of Somerset. The conventional forms of monarchy are stripped away. No standing army, no fortress of note, scarcely any allies beyond the few who have not lost faith in him. Myths recount the story of Alfred burning cakes in a peasant's hut, too consumed by strategies of war to mind domestic chores. Whether literal or metaphorical, it underscores how far a king can descend. A figure once enthroned reduced to anonymity among commoners. Yet it is in these marshes that Alfred plots his comeback. He dispatches covert messengers to Ealdormen across the region, urging them to remember the better days of Wessex, to see beyond the immediate terror inflicted by the Danes. Some remain paralyzed by fear, hesitant to defy the Vikings. Others, enraged by repeated atrocities, vow that a final stand must be made. Slowly from the damp marshes, Alfred summons enough unity to reassemble a fighting force. By 878, the Viking leader Guthrum, controlling extensive swaths of Wessex, assumes it's only a matter of time before the last Anglo-Saxon resistance collapses. But Alfred, having consolidated a small yet resolute army, breaks from the marshes under the cover of night. He aims for a conclusive battle, aware that a minor victory won't suffice to stem the Viking tide for long. As war horns echo across fields, the new West Saxon host quietly converges, building a last reservoir of strength. Rumors swirl one of Alfred's trusted lords might betray him, tipping the advantage to Guthrum. For a tense moment, it appears the entire plan could unravel, stolen by treachery before a sword is drawn. Yet the savage memory of Viking cruelty hardens the hearts of wavering nobles, and the defection never materializes. With betrayal averted, Alfred marches on with renewed purpose. All roads lead to Edington, the showdown that will decide whether Wessex stands or falls. On one side, Guthrum's veterans, buoyed by years of success, form a daunting shield wall. On the other, Alfred's newly rallied men, many fresh from the marshes or battered by prior defeats, form their own line. The Vikings expect an easy kill. Wessex's famed resilience is a relic. But as the lines close and spears clash, the West Saxons prove unyielding. Their unity holds, spurred on by Alfred's presence and the knowledge that losing here means losing everything. Hours of brutal combat tear across the field. Neither side yields easily. Then, in a sudden shift, the Viking momentum falters. Alfred commands a push that breaks Guthrum's formation, turning the Danes from a force of conquest into a panicked throng. By dusk, the once invincible Viking line collapses. Guthrum himself surrenders, kneeling before the very king he had dismissed as cornered prey. Edington's triumph is as much a moral turning point as a military one. Alfred, choosing a policy of strategic mercy, compels Guthrum to accept baptism, forging a fragile but meaningful link between Danes and Saxons. The subsequent Treaty of Wedmore divides the land, granting the eastern and northern parts, the Danelaw, to Danish control, but leaving Wessex secure under Alfred. To skeptics, it was merely a pause in the Viking storm, but to Alfred, it's the breathing space he needs to build more than just a battered kingdom. Fresh from Edington, Alfred morphs from the war hero who reclaimed a battlefield into the monarch who seeks to reshape the entire territory. He sees how close Wessex came to disintegration and vows never to let it happen again. First, he commissions a network of fortified towns called burhs, each placed at strategic crossroads or river points. No longer will raids collapse the kingdom in a single stroke. Each burh can hold out until the royal army can march to its relief. Local reeves manage these strongholds, ensuring farmers and merchants have safe havens. This synergy of localized defense transforms Wessex from a realm reliant on pitched battles to a realm structured for layered defense. At the same time, Alfred invests in a navy, admittedly small by future standards, but groundbreaking for the time. He recognizes that Viking power rests on swift waterways. If he can intercept them at sea or rivers, he curtails their greatest advantage. Though early naval sorties meet mixed success, this innovation slowly undermines the ability of raiders to appear out of nowhere. It also plants the idea that controlling the seas around England is vital to sovereignty, an idea that centuries later will become a hallmark of English, and later British, power. Perhaps even more significant is Alfred's intellectual revival. War has not just threatened the kingdom physically, it has eroded its learning and culture. Alfred sees illiteracy among nobles and clergy alike as a path to moral and societal decay. Under his prompting, Latin texts are translated into Old English, bridging older Christian teachings with the local populace. Monks copy manuscripts, building a collective memory that fosters a sense of a united society. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle takes root here, a narrative repository tracking current events, genealogies, and moral lessons. By encouraging the use of the vernacular for scholarship and administration, Alfred broadens the circle of those who can engage with royal edicts, enabling a shared identity to grow among West Saxons and, by extension, the wider Anglo-Saxon realm. He also codifies laws that combine biblical ethics with older Saxon legal customs. These serve not merely to standardize justice, but to weave together communities under a consistent moral framework. Alfred sees a monarchy that ensures fairness, thereby giving local barons and commoners tangible benefits for pledging loyalty to the king. That moral dimension sets Alfred apart from warlords who merely fight. He invests in forging a unified cultural and legal identity that can withstand more than a single generational threat. By championing a Christian moral code, he also cements his spiritual authority, positioning the monarchy as a bulwark for faith as well as for farmland and fortifications. Meanwhile, the Vikings remain a threat. Raids do not vanish overnight, and large tracts of the country remain under Danish rule in the Danelaw. But with the network of burhs, a nascent navy, and an engaged noble class, the monarchy is no longer precarious. Each new raid encounters entrenched defenses rather than scattered hamlets. The monarchy's moral cohesion means that local lords are less likely to fragment and kneel before the invaders. In essence, Alfred's policy changes shape Wessex into a strongly knit realm. Peasants can farm with relative assurance that a safe refuge is nearby. Traveling merchants expand trade behind walled towns. The once dispirited aristocracy sees a monarchy that truly leads, rather than simply reacting to crises. By the late 9th century, Alfred himself grows older, burdened by chronic illness and the stress of endless vigilance. Yet the core achievement stands. Wessex is stable, no longer a realm living week to week, waiting for the next catastrophic defeat. When Alfred dies in 899, he leaves not a broken territory, but a formidable framework his successors can build upon. Indeed, his son Edward the Elder consolidates these reforms, pushing into Danish-held lands. Later, King Athelstan extends royal authority further, culminating in what many recognize as the first truly unified England. That entire progression rests on Alfred's foundations. He overcame the immediate Viking crisis at Edington, then used that victory as a springboard to craft a monarchy that did more than survive. It created possibilities for expansion and eventual unification across the land. Alfred's life also illuminates how personal transformation under adversity can shape a nation's destiny. This was a king forced into humiliating exile, who returned with a resilient plan, not just to repel an invasion, but to reconstruct society's underpinnings. At Edington, he staked everything on one battle. After Edington, he devoted himself to ensuring Wessex wouldn't face such a do-or-die moment again. His was no ephemeral overlordship. Instead, he wove a permanent web of defensive and cultural strengths that any future raider or rival would have to grapple with. That distinct shift from ephemeral success to lasting monarchy is one of the abiding themes of Alfred's reign. One might ask how the average West Saxon farmer or artisan experienced these changes. Before Alfred's reforms, each raid threatened to reduce entire tracts of land to ash, with no fallback but flight. After the burghs and local militias come into play, villagers can retreat behind walls, tradesmen can keep shops open with some confidence, and farmland recovers. Over time, the presence of law codes and moral dictates fosters fairness in local disputes, tempering the arbitrary rule of lesser lords. Cultural revival ensures that priestly teachings reach broader layers of society, while the monarchy's reliance on Old English texts helps unify speech and identity across Wessex. The monarchy is no longer a distant overlord, but the guardian of daily life. The turning point, Edington, endures in legend. One can easily visualize the two shield walls meeting, the clang of steel, the roar of men, the final collapse of Danish morale, and Guthrum's kneeling surrender. Yet Alfred's real achievement extended far beyond that battle. Edington was the hinge upon which the monarchy's transformation spun. From a fragile kingship into a robust structure buttressed by fortifications, a nascent navy, reformed laws, and a cultural renaissance. The monarchy that emerges from this synergy is recognized not merely as a local reaction, but as a stable authority capable of outlasting the man who crafted it. After Alfred's death, the line he left behind took up the mantle of reconquest, absorbing what remained under Danelaw, forging a recognized monarchy that neighbors had to respect. Over the 10th century, this monarchy coalesced into the shape we call England. Many note Alfred's place at the root of this national story, branding him the Great, a title no other English monarch consistently claims. While some of that renown is mythologized by later centuries, the kernel of truth remains undeniable. Without Alfred's improbable stand and subsequent institutional reformation, Anglo-Saxon autonomy likely would have succumbed to the unstoppable Viking tide. Even foreign observers, centuries later, looked back at Alfred as an exemplar of a ruler who merged moral conviction with practical governance. He wasn't simply a charismatic war leader. He was a lawgiver, a promoter of learning, and a strategist who recognized that once any war is won, one must turn that victory into something that endures. In a time where ephemeral success was common and generational continuity was rare, Alfred's monarchy stood as a consistent, expanding entity. His reforms locked in the kingdom's survival, bridging the immediate crisis with a workable blueprint for future growth. We might conjure one final image to encapsulate his story. Alfred, years after Edington, stands atop a fortress wall at Winchester, gazing out at the farmland that now thrives under the watchful eyes of burgh garrisons. Merchants come and go, peasants bring harvests to sell, children learn prayers in Old English, and scribes record events in the Chronicle. In a hushed moment, a guard points to the horizon. There could still be sails out there, threats from abroad. But this time, the monarchy is prepared. Under Alfred's watch, the realm has become more than a patch of contested farmland. It has become a coordinated society, armed with defenses, moral codes, and a shared cultural identity that sees itself not just as Wessex, but as the heart of an evolving English nation. In the final account, Alfred's legacy resonates through how effectively he balanced short-term war demands with long-term structural building. Warriors can rout an enemy in a pitched battle, but only a ruler who invests in literacy, law, and systematic defense can elevate a fragile domain into a monarchy that transcends immediate crises. Alfred's brilliance lay in seeing that the horrors unleashed by the Vikings could, if handled with resolve, catalyze the forging of a stable monarchy. By capitalizing on moral authority, he rallied local lords who might have otherwise surrendered. By codifying laws, he gave them a reason to stay loyal post-crisis. By building burghs and a navy, he ensured that if the Vikings returned in force, the monarchy could still function. By championing education, he crafted a sense of cultural unity, bridging the lines of class and wealth. Centuries beyond Alfred's lifetime, the monarchy he ignited would wade through new trials. Further Viking raids under leaders like Svein Forkbeard and Canute, the eventual Norman conquest in 1066, and a long sequence of dynastic ebbs and flows. Yet the principle that a central authority could unify local interests, defend the coastlines, administer just laws, and embed a cultural identity endured in large part because Alfred had laid that ground. The monarchy he shaped no longer hinged on ephemeral alliances, but on a multifaceted system of defensive and moral pillars. His reign, though physically confined to southern England for much of his life, cast a shadow that guided how English kingship functioned from that point onward. Modern historians still glean lessons from Alfred's story about how leadership under near-apocalyptic conditions can foster not only survival, but also an institutional rebirth. While many medieval rulers found ephemeral success in battle, few translated that success into a lasting social architecture. Alfred remains among the rare few who harnessed immediate crises to produce a monarchy of real continuity. The repeated impetus of Viking aggression forced him to gather lords who might otherwise have stayed fractious. His personal reputation, forged in the desperation of the marshes, became an emotional anchor for a battered people. Victorious at Edington, he then pivoted swiftly to strengthen the realm at every level, military, legal, cultural, thus ensuring that should the Danes regroup, they would find a monarchy armed with more than swords. And so we come full circle. The sky over Britain is not as dark as before. The great heathen army no longer marches unopposed. The roads once battered bustle with trade. The fields, once blackened by torches, yield crops for a safer population. In the city fortresses, watchers keep vigil, aware that no peace is permanent, but also confident in the structures that Alfred built. The man who started as a younger son, overshadowed by older siblings, who faced repeated defeats, who fled to the marshes with no more than a handful of followers, stands at the heart of this transformation. He overcame the swirling chaos of Viking raids to build a monarchy that not only withstood the time's worst storms, but offered a platform for further unification. One can imagine, In the final hours of his life, Alfred reflecting on the improbable journey from exiled fugitive to champion of a kingdom. The land around him is far from tranquil, but it is fundamentally changed. His reforms in law, fortification, naval defense, and cultural education ensure that after his passing, the monarchy will not crumble if a single raid succeeds or a single general fails. What he forged goes deeper, forming a unity that sets the stage for the ascendancy of England in the centuries to come. That lasting monarchy, refined by future descendants, is ultimately what he bequeaths to the Anglo-Saxon people, and, by extension, to history. A lesser king might have settled for one improbable victory. Alfred ensures that from this victory, a realm would emerge, defining the identity of its people for generations beyond measure. And as the sun sets over Winchester on that final evening, the bells of the Burrs ring out not in fear, but in the quiet continuity of a kingdom no invader could extinguish, and no historian would forget.